Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and now we're joined here in the studio by Mr. Mohammad Sabreen, the renowned writer. Mr. Sabreen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Mr. Sabreen, now our Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry received the UN Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, in Cairo, talking about the Syrian crisis. Now, what do you think were the main topics on the agenda of such a meeting? What were the main updates of, or the developments, the new developments within the political process in Syria now?
Yeah, I think, Egypt's role is very essential and very important, to give a very strong push to the international efforts to put an end to the conflict in Syria. And given the fact that, Egypt in recent days getting momentum and more recognition of Egyptian role in, the area regarding this inflaming situation regarding, the insulting cartoons in crisis in France, and this the beginning of tension between, the Arab and Muslim world and Europe. So Egyptian role is very important, and Egyptian position regarding to Syria is more reasonable and more principled and fundamental, and I think it is a working formula. So this is, Cairo is very important, capital in regarding, to have support and also to play a positive role in a very difficult process, trying to reach a reasonable solution. Yeah.
Well, Shoukry actually voiced Egypt's rejection of any sort of demographic change taking place in Syria. Now, how can such a demographic change take place, and how close are we to actually this change taking place and really the country being divided into different places with different populations?
I think, Egyptian position is very clear. Egypt, with the integrity, keeping the integrity of Syria, without any changes regarding, to its own borders, and also no refusing any playing any games changing the demography. And in this regard, I think, this will open the Pandora box, because everyone understand fully that, Turkey is trying to play with the makeup of demography, especially within the area nearing its borders. But it is very dangerous once you started with a very dangerous game. You don't know exactly where are you going to end up, and it is a disaster, recipe. Not only for Syria, but all around. Even for Turkey itself, and also for Iran, and for the rest of the countries which is surrounding Syria.
Yes. Well, Egypt has made it clear that there needs to be some sort of a political and diplomatic settlement between the government and the opposition, but it also called for decisive action against the militias. Now, So it looks like there's the government, the opposition, the militias. You've mentioned Turkey, other international players being involved. But when we say reaching a political and diplomatic way of settling the issue, but also having decisive action with militias, does that mean that we can see some military interventions there or boots on the ground to deal with these militias? Or do you think that a political settlement would actually take care of eradicating any militias?
You know, let's speak a little bit frankly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these militias, you know, actually do have, you know, someone supporting them.
Mm-hmm.
So the message is actually to, you know, to whom it may be concerned,
yes.
which everybody knows,
mm-hmm.
which players, you know, regional and international players who are responsible, some by one way or another, mm-hmm. one militia and other. I think, you know, playing with militia is starting now to getting, you know, a very hard rejection
mm-hmm.
from, you know, the regional, you know, or the moderate Arab countries by the leadership of Egypt, because I think this is one of the red line of you know, Egyptian policy, which is refusing, you know, militia anywhere and mm-hmm. don't support, you know, Egypt is not supporting any militia and don't accepting, you know, any militia to be a part of any, you know, settlement or solution or whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Egypt is actually rejecting this and don't play with such a card. So I think this Egyptian position is getting more support and you know, we are having, you know, the same thing, you know, in Libya, mm-hmm. the, you know, the most important and active player, you know, in who are brokering, you know, solution in, mm-hmm. in Libya, are agreeing that, you know, we have to get rid of militia.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that you've mentioned Libya, the president said that Egypt's red line would be Sultan al-Jufra, and if you pass it, bear the consequences, basically. Do you feel that such a statement, we could hear another similar statement made by Egypt or any other country regarding the situation in Syria? Would that play a decisive role in the development of the process?
I think, you know, what is going to happen in Libya is going to give, you know, a good example, mm-hmm. you know, and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable from the international, you know, players. Mm-hmm. So by succeeding in Libya to get rid of, you know, of militia and also to get rid of the foreign players. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if we could speak a little bit more about, you know, what's happening, you know, in the Libyan file, I think, you know, Egypt is more active and embracing mm-hmm. most responsible player mm-hmm. and trying to have, you know, a homemade solution to the Libyan file and having, you know, the maximum mm-hmm. and the most important thing is going back to normality. Mm-hmm. You know, what to a more stable and more calm Libyan border and Libyan country, living in peace and, you know, and trying to, you know, to mingle among themselves mm-hmm. and not to be part of, you know, or a source of trouble to its neighbors. Mm-hmm. So if, you know, Egypt with its partner succeeded to establish this solution, I think we could very easily cooperate or contributed to the Syrian. w- I do understand that the file or the Syrian issue is a little bit more complicated, but if you succeeded in Libya, it could contribute to succeed in Syria.
Yes. Mr. Sabreen, now the whole Syrian issue it started off in 2011, so it's almost a decade now. Now, 5 years ago, late 2015, a UN resolution 2254 was established, really paving the way for a proper, stable political roadmap that would lead calm and sovereignty and security to Syria. That was 5 years ago. Why has it been so complicated? What were the main obstacles, apart from the involvement of Turkey with the militias and everything else? Why are we taking so long, 5 years, to just implement an already laid out plan through the UN resolution?
Simply because there is a lot of players are intervening, in the Syrian crisis, and plus it is very easy, to destabilize, a country and start, a violence and struggle within the country, and get support from outside players, and then it's too extremely difficult, just to go back to what was happening before the whole mess started. Everything started usually by escalation, and then, which lead to miscalculations, and then will lead to to violence and war.
Yes.
So this is the Syrian crisis. Actually a good example of this formula: escalation, miscalculation, and then leading to the war, and then a lot of players thinking at one time or another, they are very nearing to have its own way and get all the rewards, and playing a sum game. It seems to us and to the rest of players, that this illusion is not true. Nobody is actually capable of playing this sum game, and the Syrians, they don't want to have their country to be splitted, or and they want to go back to normality. I think with different agenda from the neighboring and surrounding countries, and also with international player, and also with a lot of issues regarding what is happening in Syria with the oil and gas in Syria, and strategic position, and Syria also its relation with Israel, and with all these difficult and complicated elements actually adding to the complicity. But again and again, and this is one is very, very important, to a red line from from Egypt and the rest of the Arab countries. We are not going to tolerate with dividing and destabilizing the Arab countries. We are not going to accept changing the map of the Arab countries. And I think Egypt is started a very long struggle, trying to keep the borders and the demography and the makeup, and trying to bring back, the Arab countries and the whole of the region to stability and back to normal, and to the situation before 2011.
Yes.
It is a big struggle. It's a big fight. But I think when we started, it was uphill battle. But now I think we are starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
And I think the rest of the international community start to realizing that this is a very bad game and it is not actually contributing not only to to the goodwill of the region, but also it is a big opening a big Pandora box and affecting Europe and the rest of the world with a lot of extremists and a lot of terrorism movement and a lot of illegal immigration and you name it.
Yes. Well, talking about international players and the international community, now you've mentioned that Egypt is playing a mediating role in both Syria and Libya, maybe Libya a bit of a bigger role, but another country that's heavily involved in Syria is Russia. Now, how would you evaluate the participation of Russia in trying to solve the Syrian crisis? How similar is the Russian stance to Egypt regarding the Syrian crisis?
I think Egypt and Russia is both of them actually agreeing about keeping the integrity of Syria, and both of them are actually supporting reaching a political solution, and all local players, they must sit in the table and try to reach a very difficult and very painful solution, but there is no other way. There is no military solution.
Do you see Russia exercising more pressure on countries such as Turkey?
I think Russia on the ground and supporting the government, the legitimate government, and on the ground, and is actually keeping the Turkish in check.
Mr. Sabreen, now Russia has backed a conference that was organized by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to promote the return of the refugees. About 5.5 million Syrian refugees are all around the world, mainly in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. But do you feel that now the time is right for the Syrian refugees to actually return to Syria? They didn't yet agree on a final constitution. Still, the militias are there. It is still in crisis. The European Union has actually not backed such a conference that is scheduled to be held pretty soon. What do you think of Russia supporting President Bashar al-Assad for the promotion of the return of the refugees, and do you think it's the time?
Let's first, try to look to this issue from, two different things. The refugee crisis in itself. This is, it is a crisis in itself, and I think, if the international community and the regional player could help to ease the pain of these refugees and support them to go back to their homes, at least to the area which under the control of the government, and starting reconstruction and ending the suffering of these civilian. This is in itself must be, look at it as an important issue in itself. But going back to real politics, I think, now everybody is trying to play with this card, to pressuring, the other one, to come to a little bit to its own conditions.
So do you feel that it is definitely a plus, the humane aspect of the return of the refugees, but also the refugees being actively in Syria would actually put more pressure on the government and opposition to maybe give in a little bit, a bit of compromises, maybe add some pressure to agree at least on a final constitution?
If we speak about Turkey, because Turkey, one of the, a strong card, which is playing and intimidating, Europe is the refugee. So if you are taking, this card from the Turkish, hand, I think you start to a little bit, weakening, the Turkey position. And I think from the other side, the players, who are not very happy with Bashar al-Assad regime, they would like to use this card, and also the reconstruction, to a little bit, to push Bashar al-Assad government, to actually to speed, this kind of peaceful solution. So the issue of refugee in itself, we have to look from its own merits, but reality is real politics, because the refugee is also connected with how we are going to reconstruct Syria, who's going to get what, and which kind, what is the future of Syria. So all the big question regarding, the final solution of Syria is actually under way of negotiation. So it seems to me that we didn't reach, yet.
Yeah, but why do you think the European Union has not backed such a conference? I mean, there are a lot of Syrians all around Europe as well. Why did they not back the promotion of the return of refugees to Syria? Because
up till now, they are not reaching out to the Syrian government. To the contrary, I think the American government, under the Trump administration, we are seeing and hearing some leaks that they are doing some kind of secret negotiation regarding trying to get some kind of a deal.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll definitely be talking about that a little bit later, but also one of the main steps in the laid out plan through the UN Resolution 2254 was the establishment of a Syrian constitution. Now, the Syrian Constitutional Committee is set to meet up in Geneva by the end of November this month to try and settle a final Syrian constitution. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Russia has expressed its hope that a new meeting of the Syrian Constitutional Committee would be held in Geneva by the end of the month. In a press briefing, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova had expressed Moscow's hope for a new meeting of the committee thanks to negotiations conducted by the UN Special Envoy to Syria, Geir Pedersen, in Damascus. Zakharova stated that the recent intensification of the activity of Daesh sleeper cells in eastern and central Syria, especially in the areas under the control of the so-called Kurdish Autonomous Administration east of the Farats, raising growing concern in Russia. The Russian diplomat indicated that there were reports of an increased number of terrorist attacks against bases of the Syrian army and the Kurdish militias. Pedersen arrived in Cairo via Turkey, where he held meetings with the Turkish regime officials, including the Deputy Foreign Minister Sadat Onal, to discuss the progress of the work of the committee. At an earlier stage, Pedersen held talks with Russian and Iranian officials, during which they discussed the developments. The committee had concluded its third meeting in Geneva last August. The national delegation, the opposition delegation and the civil society delegation were in attendance. Pedersen visited Damascus late last month, where he met with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates, Walid al-Muallim, as well as the head of the national delegation, Ahmed al-Quzbari, during a virtual foreign ministerial meeting on the small group on Syria that comprises Egypt, Jordan, France, Germany, Saudi Arabia, Britain and the United States. Egypt confirmed its rejection to any foreign intervention in Syria and highlighted its support for the efforts aimed at strengthening the work of the Constitutional Committee in order to achieve its desired goals, and the need for all concerned Syrian parties to engage positively in the work of the committee in support of the efforts of the political settlement of the Syrian crisis.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Mr. Sabreen. Mr. Sabreen, now, at the end of November, the Syrian Constitutional Committee should be meeting in Geneva trying to settle a final constitution. How feasible is it to reach a final constitution by the end of this month, realistically?
It is a very tough question, but I think if there is some kind of understanding, we could reach at least some kind of agreement, but it will be a little bit more difficult of how we actually start to implement, as they said, the devil in the details. But I think there is a big momentum that pushing to try to at least to reach a roadmap, or working or moving on the roadmap toward some kind of a solution. It will need a lot of compromises from all parties.
Mr. Sabreen, now you've mentioned that there were many pieces of information or rumors or whatever that the US administration for the past few years under the administration of Donald Trump has been holding secret talks, trying to find some sort of a compromise and a settlement between the Syrian divisions. Now, if that is true, do you think that it would change under a new administration with Joe Biden as president?
Okay, we reading right now that there is some kind of differences. Trump administration or Trump himself would like to get American soldiers to go back, to the United States, and if the new government or a new administration is actually going to reach out to Iran and try to re-sign the old agreement, the nuclear one, and reach some kind of understanding to negotiate the other issues regarding the missiles arsenal, the Iranian missile arsenal, and also the Iranian intervention in some issues and files. So one of these files will be Syria. So if the new administration starting a long process, to negotiate and to compromise or to reach some kind of an agreement, maybe by default or by the domino effect. It will be open or obstacle, what is happening in Syria. By the same token, will be the Russian-American relationship. If it is going to be toward more understanding, then it will be another factor to try to ease, things regarding, the situation in Syria. But if the new administration is going to escalate, regarding Russia, then by default and by the side effect, it will be a little bit affecting what's happening in Syria. So all these, again, what's the new policy of the American regarding, Turkey? What's the new American administration policy regarding with, playing with political Islam or with this, organization? Are we going to have resumption of this creative, chaos, which is so. Yes. There is a lot of things, but it seems to me, or maybe it's my hope that our area and also the world is actually suffering a lot from a lot of crises, especially coronavirus, and also the economic effects from this crisis, and in the region, and also the international community needs some time of breeze. So let's hope and pray that maybe we could reach some kind of consensus, and the moderate and reasonable player will be revealed in the coming days and months.
Well, we should hope so, but we've talked about the different players within the Syrian issue. We talked about Turkey, Egypt, Russia, and you've also mentioned now Iran. Now, if the US can cut a deal, a new deal with Iran, maybe re-sign the 2015 nuclear agreement with them, and maybe by signing the agreement, Iran would not be involved in Syria, even though it is involved in many parts of the region. Do you think Iran would want that? Do you think Iran would still want to step back from the region, step back from Syria and sign the nuclear agreement, or are they better off now?
I don't think that Iran is going to to give up whatever having some kind of influence or some kind of interest in the region. I think Iran first of all wants to have guarantees of keeping the regime and not destabilize or removing or playing against the regime. This is first one priority. The second priority is for the Iranian, which is connected with the first one, is actually having some some kind of engagement in the surrounding and also in the area. So we have to wait and see, because if Iran wants to be if Iran wants to be a constructive player and playing with the rule and as a normal country and don't do any harm to its neighbors, I think the region will be welcoming. So it will depend, but definitely Iran is not going to give up easily and without any price for whatever achieved in the region. Iran is actually heavily involved in a lot of files, in the area.
Yes. Mr. Sabreen, I want to take it back to Egypt now. Egypt is really trying to play a strong mediating role in Libya and in Syria. And it's both countries, the situation in both countries is affecting Egypt's national security because of the political turmoil, because of the militias, the extremist groups there. Now trying to solve both countries, do you think it will have an effect on the other? Are they directly or indirectly related, and would that affect the number of militias and extremists moving around back and forth between those two countries and maybe spilling over other surrounding countries, including Egypt?
First of all, the whole situation and the whole development actually prove one thing, that Egypt is the cornerstone for the stability of this region. And no one is capable to replace Egypt or actually challenge Egypt in its own natural, role. And look around and see what's happening right now in Ethiopia. There was a lot of, reports and a lot of big talks regarding, this country and that country, but when things actually, confronted with the reality on the ground, with the reality of history, with the reality of geography, with the reality of, the strong of the society, and the loving and constructive role of one nation like Egypt, it is irreplaceable. So from this regard, I'm quite sure that Egypt, with its own Arab countries and also with its own, big coalition with Russia, France, Britain, America, and Europe, and also Japan and South Korea, are going to succeed to end up this militia, and also to end this irresponsible, endeavor, which is started with constructive chaos, because now we are seeing, the dangers. Now everybody is speaking about is that, if Ethiopia is getting, is heading toward civil war, is going to spill over the whole region in Africa and, and the rest. So
yes.
The international community, maybe they do have some hidden agenda, but I don't think that they are stupid enough, not to encourage and to get supporting, Egypt. And we saw recently, the chairman of Britain intelligence speaking about the Egyptian role and how Egypt is very important to the stability, and so from this regard, I'm quite convinced. Not only because I'm Egyptian, I love my country. This is it's very clear, but because of the test of time.
Yes.
Because we heard the same story a lot of times, that we are going, Egypt is going to be pushed away, and somebody else is going. Nobody do have the wisdom of Egypt, the history, the diplomacy, the strength,
yes.
And the strength of the Egyptian people supporting their own leadership. And from a long time, Egypt wants peace in the whole region, because this is the only way, to have prosperity and stability, and you name it.
Yes. Well, Mr. Sabreen, as you've mentioned now, the Egyptian diplomacy has been really revered and seen by the whole international community, and it's regarded for its patience, its diplomacy, its rationale, everything that is related to the Egyptian politics. Egypt is involved in Syria, in Libya, in the Mediterranean with Cyprus and Greece. It's still involved with the dam talks in Ethiopia for almost a decade now.
Yeah.
So trying to mediate and influence the situation in Syria and Libya as well. But focus on Syria. What is Egypt's strongest card? What does it have to persuade the divisions, the factions, the opposition, the government? What do they have to offer? How can they influence or pressure the situation there to reach a safe and stable political solution?
I think number one card is credibility.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think, you know, the Egypt credibility and the good relation, you know, between Egypt and most of the players who are involved in the Syrian conflict. And another important thing is that, you know, that Egypt was actually saying from the very beginning,
mm-hmm.
you know, that this is a wrong way to handle the situation in Syria, that, you know, it is not going to lead to anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And by time, by a lot of blood, by a lot of destruction, by a lot of intervention, you know, all the players reach to the dead end.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them admitting that, you know, the Egyptian, you know, foreseeing or vision was very clear and was very reasonable and was not, coming from its own wishes, but coming from own wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So credibility and accessibility to all partners. The third one, Egypt is a very good and important force in the region. So you can't ignore what Egypt accept and don't accept. And
mm-hmm.
from the very beginning, Egypt are saying that, you know, we are not going to accept the division of Syria or that Syria could be harmed. So
mm-hmm.
this is a very big plus to saving or keeping, you know, the Syrian to be stable, and also Egypt
yes.
is willing and capable of trying to convince to reach a very pragmatic and solution to the crisis. So from this regard, with all these cards, Egypt's role is very important, could actually facilitate
mm-hmm.
and convince the partners, because Egypt could speak to both parties, you
yes.
know, and still opening, you know, the doors, you know, and very clear, you know,
mm-hmm.
not from under the table. And Egypt don't have any hidden agenda in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
Egypt is actually supporting the Syrian people and, you know, looking to the well-being of the Syrians. So everybody don't have any misconvenience or any doubts regarding Egypt or Egyptian intentions, and from Egyptian people and also from Egyptian leadership.
Yes, and hopefully this transparency and Egyptian goodwill would help play a role in solving the situation in Syria, also in Libya, many other situations and crises around the region. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Mr. Mohammad Sabreen, the renowned writer. Mr. Sabreen, always a pleasure having you with us. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Not International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.